Thank you for being here with me today. We are day 2 of International Airport Summit, nearly at the end, which is rather sad, but it's been a good couple of days so far. So I'm here with Claire Waghorn, Sustainable Transition Leader from Christchurch International Airport. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you.
So my first question to you is, and I've actually stolen your question from your panel session just now, but what's your vision of beyond 2050?
Well, I think what we have ahead of us is some really critical challenges, which is we're facing increasing climate adaptation. We've already locked in some significant warming, not solely aviation caused, but we're part of it. And so being prepared for climate adaptation, I think, will be critical, but then not losing sight of the benefits of aviation, which is the connectivity that we bring. So I would love to see beyond 2050, and actually I'd love to see this before 2050 if anything, decarbonised aviation sector that connects with multimodal transport provisions in a way that no longer has the greenhouse gas impact, continues to be a great source of connectivity, but it also allows us to be adaptable. Because one of the things that aviation offers that not all other forms of transport can is a mode of transportation which is adaptable to some of the climate risks that we are going to face in particular. And when I think of the New Zealand context and a lot of the challenges that we've faced, we've had significant earthquakes, we've had flooding and surface water issues that have literally cut the South Island of New Zealand in half, where those on the south of the south can't access the top of the south because the bridges have been washed out. And so having multi-modes of transportation, which includes aviation, is obviously highly adaptive. So I think there's benefits to aviation that shouldn't be lost, yet we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we need to get rid of that greenhouse gas impact.
Absolutely. And so yesterday you spoke briefly about how your teams are split into like a microscope team, telescope team. Yeah. Could we just explore this a little bit more and how that impacts efficiency? And
absolutely. Yeah. This was I guess our leadership strategic approach when COVID sort of happened to the business. There was a recognition that, gosh, this is a big thing. We need a really critical focus, a microscope on how do we deal with COVID at an operational level. And that was all consuming for a lot of our staff. On the other hand, while we go through that, there's big challenges that we don't want to lose sight of. And that's the telescope piece, where we're looking out at 2030, 2040, 2050 and beyond that, making sure that we're not losing sight of that work while we're immediately trying to get our heads around what COVID is presenting to us. So in that sense, we had a microscope and a telescope, and I was in the telescope team, which I imagine can be infinitely irritating to those that are in the microscope team that are just dealing with the day-to-day, and I'm talking about how good life could be in 2050. But then again, I also think it's really important that when you face challenges, you don't lose sight of what your overall goals are.
Absolutely. And it's probably quite hard to limit it down, but what's a key sustainability initiative that you feel airports should focus on?
I just think it has to be climate. It's the biggest risk to our sector, and I think it's so important that we front foot it, and that actually we see it as an opportunity. Aviation is responsible for between 2 and 4% of global emissions. That means we could solve 2 to 4% of global emissions. We're a transition industry. We don't have to be the problem child. We could be the solution. So I think that's a huge opportunity if we front foot the challenge.
I agree. And what are your key takeaways from our summit so far?
I'm struck by the different challenges that airports face, that we each have our own very unique personality. And whether that's geography or legislative environments or culture, yet we have almost like-minded airports. I have found that there's a lot in common actually between the New Zealand airports and the Nordic airports. And I just find it really fascinating to reach out and understand the stories and the challenges that different airports are facing, and to be able to share those with others that are going through a similar piece is, it's everything. It's high value, and I think it's what these summits are all about.
Absolutely. Well, that was my last question, so thank you very much.
My pleasure.